The compounders are worried about being able to still function in the state.
Yeah.
Because everyone thinks of the FDA as this great bastion of wisdom.
Make sure that the pharmacies that we've utilized are good sources of these peptides.
They're not saying it's going to hurt your license if you continue to recommend peptides.
Mm-hmm.
FDA power grab.
Right.
To the point where now they control all tissue that's in a tissue bank. It's not even yours, it's the FDA's. It's just a big threat against anyone that makes it, uses it, writes for it, or recommends it.
Correct.
Welcome to the Zero Downside Podcast with Dr. Wade McKenna, sponsored by MoabTexas.com.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode. Today we have a really exciting topic. We've mentioned it before about peptides. Now these peptides are starting to get a little bit more regulated, and Dr. McKenna and Mike are very passionate about patients and the population having access to these peptides and all the great capabilities they have for our health and wellness. And so I'm going to have them share their inputs and feedback on that new situation now. And can't wait for you guys to hear all about it.
All right. Thank you very much, Hannah. We appreciate the introduction as always. As you mentioned, this is a very unique episode. You know, we're trying to be current on our events, and recently at the end of September, the FDA published a list of essentially category 2 compounded medications, which everyone knows as peptides. And so today we're going to go ahead and stay current in our events, and we're going to have a discussion around the FDA's list and what it means for patients, providers, and compounding pharmacies.
Well, I think first let's just say that this is an FDA out of nowhere, based on about as much science as they base a lot of things on, which is about none. Decision, a unilateral decision made without input from physicians, without input from a lot of compounding pharmacists, but with the input of a lot of pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah.
And have decided in their infinite wisdom, because everyone thinks of the FDA as this great bastion of wisdom.
I'm going to sink down in my chair.
I will just tell you, it's going to be hard for me to navigate the regulatory waters that we need to today.
Mm-hmm.
And hold back some of the righteous indignation that is absolutely on our side in this particular battle, because the regulatory stance taken by the FDA against a lot of peptide therapy that is currently being provided all over the world in a very safe, physician-mannered way, mm-hmm. for the most part. They're going to make it where, even under physician guidance, they're making a lot of peptides banned, where and this isn't like, you know, we had the discussion on our podcast about banned substances, like BPC 157. It's banned by NCAA and
MLB, NFL, NHL,
but not because it didn't help.
Right.
It was banned because they thought it was as a competitive advantage.
Performance enhancing
drug, PED. The FDA is now banning those substances
from being compounded.
There we are. Because you can't patent a peptide, or it's not a drug if it's naturally occurring substance. Mm-hmm. We've been through this a ton, that the stem cells secrete there are 7,000 naturally occurring peptides in the human body. There's about 40 we could write you a script for.
Yeah.
We're going to have to change that, because there aren't 40 that we're going to be able to continue to write you a script for through a compounder. there are going to be some peptides that, because the FDA has decided to put the label, what is the Schedule 2 labeling exactly? Well, I'm gonna let Mike read it.
Yes.
because it's not this is not classification of drugs like, which, that's a Schedule 2 or this is a Schedule 1. This is an FDA schedule of 3 different types of regulatory control over medicines.
Yes.
Right.
It's not a law, right? It's basically a status of
because you
where
have
they're
to
at.
pass a law. Like, you can't just decide a law. So it's not a law, but they don't care because they're a regulatory agency and they don't have to operate within laws.
Correct.
They can just make rules, and it's going to be followed by the medical industry and by a physician because we don't want to lose our license.
Correct. There's a threat of a future potential enforcement that could be retroactive to the date that they listed, which if I read the whole edict correctly, and first off, let me pause and state that this commentary is for entertainment purposes only.
As always.
It is quite literally an op-ed on a current event, and we're merely giving opinions, not under professional licensure, but we're just commenting on a website that we happen to see.
We're going to have a scientific conversation based on our use, knowledge of, and study of different peptides and formulas we've used in the clinic for long periods of time and have a lot of patient experience with.
Yeah.
We're going to have a discussion around the new regulatory push by the FDA to bring a lot of these into a Schedule 2, which would mean that you're not allowed to use them anymore.
Yes.
As a compounded peptide, because there's going to be companies seeking to monetize this in ways that are much more significant than a compounder could monetize a peptide.
Yeah, and I want to cover that in detail a little later, because I think that's the what's in it for me, for anybody listening, and what's in it for the companies themselves, and how are things like this monetized, versus supplements.
Well, if you take away other choices from people, they have to hone in on what the big choices are.
Yeah.
And people that don't want to have to take a medication for everything are going to have less choices.
Agreed. So let's get to the meat of the argument, if we will. So it is basically an announcement of a Category 2 of the bulk substances nominated under Sections 503A or 503B of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. So I'm going to paraphrase. You don't want to see me sit here on camera and list off everything on the site, and please feel free to go to the FDA site itself and do your own research. Essentially, they finalized 2 guidelines clarifying their proposed policies concerning the use of certain bulk drug substances in compounding by state licensed pharmacies, federal facilities, and licensed physicians under the 503A and 503B. I'll paraphrase a little bit. Essentially, they go down the list, and there are several peptides, and what they do is they list each individual peptide followed by whether it's a 503A or 503B classification, and then the date that it was added, followed by safety risks. So several popular ones for weight loss, for energy, for sleep, for sexual wellness. They're all in here, right? The very first one is AOD 9604, which is a weight loss drug.
No. It's a peptide.
Excuse me. It is a
that
peptide.
encourages
You're correct.
lipolysis.
This is perfect. I'm glad you corrected me on camera. That is absolutely
not a
right.
weight loss drug. If it was a weight loss drug, it'd be fine.
And it'd be patented.
Because there's
monetized.
all kind of weight loss drugs out there that are really, really unhealthy for you. Significant increased risk of cardiomyopathy, stroke, high blood pressure, heart attack. But because they're a anti-appetite or an appetite suppressant, even though it's in the same drug category as meth, it's fine because it's a drug.
There you
and
are.
then it's fine.
Yeah.
AOD is a peptide that can increase, and works better in women than men. It can increase your calorie burning towards lipolysis, as a peptide can influence structure and function. That is not going to be allowed anymore. Under the proposed, I love it. So no one knows even they say November 1st, but if you read the wording on it, it says proposed, thought about. Like this is this typical saber rattling of an FDA warning letter that is meant to just gather all the sheep in one place for slaughter. Because what happens is the warning letter it's like a contract. It just sets the terms for the lawsuit later, right? Like if you sign a contract with someone, you just need to sign a contract with good people, right? Because the person signing the contract is the most important part of the deal, not the contract. The contract is just terms of the litigation later. And that's kind of the way the FDA does these big warning letters. Is they're not saying it's going to hurt your license if you continue to recommend peptides. Mm-hmm. But they don't have to say that.
No,
because it is the understood. Yes. I want it left open for because I want you all to be scared of me, right? I want the knee bent, the head bowed as you approach me on this issue of healthcare, because I am the great arbitrator of what's going to happen. Like it's a very unilateral decision. It's not public hearings on safety and efficacy. No. It's not public hearings with physician involvement. It's not patients that have seen dramatic improvement on certain substances. It's a unilateral edict made by a political organization that is funded by Big Pharma. That's where they get their budget. That's where they get their money. You pay for drug approval. Mm-hmm. That was changed under a previous administration who made it to where, as part of a big healthcare plan that went through, they basically was an insurance entitlement act and a big pharma FDA power grab, to the point where now they control all tissue that's in a tissue bank. It's not even yours. It's the FDA's. It's not.
Well, let's back up. Explain that one briefly, because I don't want to miss that.
So before 2008, I have the umbilical cord and entire placenta and all the cord blood in all three of my daughters. One of my daughters is born in 1997. There wasn't a whole lot of options to do that, but I thought it was important. I knew that those cells were going to be crucial sometime in their life, potentially, that if we ever got the government to decriminalize the practice of medicine and science, and by that I mean this is ethically sourced tissue from a live birth C-section, that tissue graft should be able to be used for the health and wellness of our family, and especially the placenta of the baby that delivery was from. But the only way to do that's going to be to bank it and store it. And so at the time it was via cord or via cell, and then became cord blood bank registry. The company's been sold a bunch. Now there's more options than that. But my goal with that was, as an orthopedic surgeon and trauma at the time already, there's going to be a time where we're going to be able to take some of these cells, culture them up, and we can cure rheumatoid arthritis. We're going to be able to cure your autoimmune dysfunction. We already know that they're using those cells for the treatment of cancer and lymphoma and leukemia. Matter of fact, that's the only FDA approved use of those cells. So that's the only use you get to use those cells for, because the FDA decided that. Even though I've been paying for that tissue storage since 97, in 2008, the FDA decided they own it all. And you can only get that tissue checked out, that placenta that half mine, all of my daughters, is not able to be checked out unless the FDA approves the use for those cells or the tissue or the outer layer of the amnion. So if you use it in an FDA approved manner, which there's about 20 or 30 different leukemias and lymphomas, the cancers that are on that list, that if one of my kids got a first degree sibling or relative, we could take those cells, culture them at an FDA approved facility, and use that tissue to treat us. That is not the situation that I donated, paid for the storage, and secured all that tissue under. It was under the thought that it's ours, and we'll be able to have access to those cells as the science opens up their best use and best chances of optimizing the function of that tissue. That is not how it's happened since that.
Yeah.
And so the FDA has started this move against this a long time ago.
Yes.
But now they're kind of, it's like when the other side used to at least pretend that they cared about how you thought.
Yeah.
And so they were able to kind of hide the narrative. Like everyone kind of assumed that what you saw in the news maybe wasn't the whole story, but you at least thought they tried to stay true to the event. Like you think that they maybe expand the details if it makes a better story, right? Like I get it, whatever. It's clickbait stuff.
Yeah.
But when the narrative is completely different than what they're saying, it's not just clickbait stuff anymore. It's purposely misleading people.
Yeah.
And the way that the regulatory guidance is being posted right now,
it's a rough word.
It's just a big threat against anyone that makes it, uses it, writes for it, or recommends it.
Correct.
Because we may come off your license someday. We're not doing it now, but we're putting these on a banned list.
Yeah.
They're not doing the drug form of several of the most commonly prescribed and recommended peptides, because you can't patent a peptide. You can patent a delivery mode, a dosing schedule, which that's what
A formulary, a method. Yes.
So they patent those things. And when Big Pharma makes them, they're $1,500 a month at the pharmacy, and you pay the same regardless what your dose is. So if you're on the 5 milligram dose, you pay the same as on the 15 milligram dose, and the same as on the 10 milligram dose, which I don't know what kind of farm and ranch they were raised on, but 5 should never cost the same as 15. And if it does, either you're charging not enough for the 15 or you're overcharging for the 5.
Yeah. It's just a flat charge for everything.
It's a flat charge because they're not charging. Like if I can get Wagyu for the same price as hamburger, I would never buy hamburger. There are certain dishes and moods where I don't want to spend $20 on a hamburger patty. And so I won't buy Wagyu to make hamburger. I will buy hamburger. I think that the FDA is making it, and drug companies make it, where, look, we all know that depending on how I write your script, you may get 30, 60, or 90, and the pharmacy charge you the same price.
Regardless.
Yeah. Because it's not about what they're selling you, right? Like the stupidest thing ever. If some of these drugs are generic and it's $10 on the list, if I write it for once a day, they're going to give you 30 for that $10. If I write it for twice a day, they're going to give you 60 for the same $10. If I write it 3 times a day, you're going to get 90 for the same. Like that's not like. I don't know how broken a system has to be where 30 costs the same as 90, but it's definitely broken, right?
Yeah.
Like that doesn't work. So when you put drug companies in charge of their own regulatory status, you know what they do? They try to regulate out everyone else that has an answer for you with less complication, side effects, and with less financial incentives for the companies that make the drugs. Not a compounding pharmacy guy trying to just struggle along. Dude, there's not a lot of margins in compounded medications or compounded peptides. And because there's not a lot of margin in it, Big Pharma had no interest.
Yeah.
Now, if they could make those into a drug, there will be a lot of interest in the drug use of certain of these peptides that have been proven really efficacious in treating people.
Let me pause here and I kind of want to get your insight on this. Again, this is an unscripted episode. I'm actually excited about it because
and scared to death at the same time because Mike is literally has a notepad of all the regulatory stuff in his lap.
Yeah, I don't often carry notepads.
I always have yellow pads with me.
Yes, but for me to keep up with your expertise and where you're at, I'm going to cheat and have the Cliff's Notes, right? So I've been on the phone for the last week and a half with pharmacists everywhere, just trying to catch up to the current event conversation so that we
because
can have
everyone's
this.
Scared.
Yes. Oh, look, I'm waiting for a laser
feeling like they have their
hit.
license being threatened as a physician.
Yes.
The compounders are worried about being able to still function in the state.
Yeah.
And it's a federal guideline, not a state guideline. There may be some opportunity for the state to step in and protect people and do some things the way other states have done against some of the mandated FDA things that have shown to not necessarily be great for people.
Yeah.
And really not even to be efficacious for their prescribed use, that now you don't even need a prescription. The pharmacist can recommend it and you can get pharmaceutical given versions of a drug that there's maybe no data on that helps you, and a lot of data that it's going to hurt you and increase your risk of myocarditis and death of all causes and all kinds of things. And it doesn't even have to be recommended to you by a physician.
No.
There's no health status that excludes you from getting it, and a pharmacist can give it to you and the government will pay for it, and it's $6,500 a dose. That's fine. But a peptide compounded version of a broken down protein that the body makes that's readily available that could be used to augment or supplement someone's health status, there's no room for in medicine. We're not going to let a doctor recommend it. We're not going to let a doctor write it. We're not going to let a compounder make it, because that's really risky.
Yeah.
Now, this other thing that we're going to give you that you have to inject, we don't even think you need a doctor's opinion to have that injection. We think everyone needs to do it regardless of what your doctor says.
Yeah.
We don't think there's a health condition that excludes you from it, because even if you're pregnant and we can't let you take Tylenol without increasing the risk that your kid flunks a math test someday and you can sue someone over it, because those lawsuits are going on right now over Tylenol.
Yes, they are.
With ADHD. We're not going to protect drug companies from that kind of stuff, but we're going to let a pregnant woman take a form of medical treatment that didn't prevent what it was trying to prevent, didn't keep you from giving other people what it was trying to keep you from giving.
Oh, no.
And it didn't lower your symptoms for what they were trying to treat it, but it does cause a lot of side effects, maybe of myocarditis, increasing your risk of certain autoimmune difficulties. That's fine. You don't need to see a doctor to get it. Even if your doctor says you shouldn't get it, you probably need to. A pharmacist can give it to you at their own accord, and we're going to pay for it as a government to make sure you get it without any safety standards, without randomized placebo control groups, and with a lot of safety data to say it wasn't efficacious, even if it was safe.
Yeah.
Was it effective?
Yeah.
A 3-year-old flu vaccine isn't effective on preventing the flu.
Yeah.
That's basically what we've been doing as a country.
And by the way,
it'd be supported.
Yes.
And by the way, castigated if you didn't buy that narrative from the FDA.
Oh, but the pharmacies didn't have protection during this time, right?
Oh,
the big pharma
drug
companies.
Yeah, you can't sue them.
What?
Oh, yeah. So our government, as an entitlement act for big pharma, because big pharma doesn't make any money. Right, those poor, desperate research guys, because all those pharmaceutical companies are just struggling in anonymity.
Yeah,
they haven't just there used to be 50, 100 great little drug companies around. Now there's like 4, right? So they haven't protected from consolidation. And you know what happens with less choices? Like you can have, I love the George Carlin line. There's 300 choices of what kind of breakfast cereal you can get, but there's 2 oil companies. Like there's 4 drug companies. Yeah. There's but you can have all these. It's the appearance of choice. Right?
Yeah.
So,
let's
with the
let's
appearance
stay,
of choice,
yes, that's where I want
with the
go.
appearance of choice, it looks like a patient can decide to take a nutritional route for their healthcare issues, which is the way most peptides should be considered.
Yeah.
Not a compounded drug, but the FDA is saying that because of, and there are some valid safety concerns that we've shown all along the way. When we talked about peptides, do we ever think it was a great idea to bulk source materials from outside of our country?
No.
You know what? It is a bad idea. Guess what? The FDA is using to make all this illegal, I guess is the word we're going to use, maybe? It's certainly against guidance.
It's frowned upon against it's a safety
guidance.
risk.
The FDA has come out that but you know what? We agreed that outsourcing materials that weren't filtered appropriately, that may have had metallic components in it, was a really bad idea. That's why we told people, don't get BPC from the guys at the gym.
Yeah.
Right? Which now they're going to make it where you're going to have to get your BPC from a guy at the gym, because the doctor's not going to be able to write you a script and prescribe it.
So let me slow down, because look, this is a passionate conversation, but I want to back up.
I want to be controlled, but I also want people to understand what just happened.
Yes. Well, that's where I want to go. So
right.
I want to back up a little bit. So prior to physicians guiding care involving peptides, right? It was bought on websites, and these websites you didn't know where the lab was, and what they're referred to as research chem labs. Okay, they were all under the guise
Which
of
there are
research.
plenty of them, and you can buy a lot of stuff that have been banned for a long time.
And listen, they had
And
some,
I would never send someone to a website to receive something that I thought was a good idea to ban.
yes,
Which a lot of the stuff that's being banned was a good idea to ban.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, so what happens if you go with something that is non-pharma grade is you risk contamination. And so all of these
But you
peptides,
don't ban something based on a contamination.
But that's-
you make it where it's only okay to get non-contaminated product,
Yes.
right?
So what we've
You
done
regulate the people that don't do it well.
Correct.
And get rid of them from the market. That's protection. That's what the FDA was set up to do. Protect the health and welfare of the public from bad drugs.
Correct. Now we're driving the public to go back to the original source before it was provider guided. You would get online, you would be on Reddit, you'd be on 4chan or whatever site that you went to look up, hey, how do I get healthier? How do I lose weight? How do I sleep better? And you would get recommendations. The guy at the gym busts a BPC. We've had patients come in with BPC vials with no label. Literally just had almost handwritten BPC 157. We're like, stop taking that because you don't know.
Hey, Doc,
what's
what do you
in the
think about
vial.
this?
Yes.
I don't know. What's in it? Who made it? Where's it from? What's the sourcing look like?
Yes.
Was it sterilely component? Was it through 503B? Was it in a GCP lab? Who's like, if I don't know anything about it, I would never inject something into my body I didn't know.
Correct.
Who filtered it, where it was, if it was sterile, if it was safe, and exactly what it is it.
So
Oh, by the way, I would want like a list of ingredients.
Yes.
A formula.
which has to
how
be
it was
provided by a
made.
pharmacy.
Well, it certainly hasn't been provided on the
Black market.
or the most recommended treatment, medical procedure, drug, injection paid for in the history of our country.
Correct.
No ingredient list on that's been disclosed, and the FDA's never approved it, but fine with it and encouraging it. And
Well, it was an EUA, of course. But on the note of peptides, what we've done is we took a black market because people found a good, effective
Found something
use
that
of
worked.
peptide.
Yeah.
And then doctors, providers such as yourself, took it and went, you know what? This does work. There's some traction here. We're going to go
But
to
we need to find a
compounded
safe way to
pharmacies
recommend this for a
that-
patient.
Yes,
Yes.
That use very special filtration to get rid of any metal
Yes.
contaminants, anything else. These are naturally occurring.
I want a certain level of
peptides.
training going in the person putting that in a bottle.
Yes,
I want it to be under a certain qualified lab to be able to do it.
100%.
And I want to know where the material was sourced from and that it has been filtered appropriately for metals.
Yeah. So on that note,
sounds like we were doing something on the patient's behalf
yes. Shocking.
to make something safer that we already think had some efficacy successes in patient. And we just wanted to give people different options outside of what would be considered Western medicine, right? That sounds like exactly what I would be looking for if I was a patient.
So essentially what we're talking about today is we've taken the black market thing that had some good efficacious use and put it under guidance and protection by having proper pharmacy grade materials being used. It was going under testing, all standard operating procedures. Everything was under guidance, right?
Yeah.
Now we've taken that and put a stopper on it. And now we're driving patients back because guys aren't going to stop taking BPC. Guys aren't going to stop taking AOD. They're not going to stop taking MK677, right? They're going to go back to the websites. They're going to source it from
Hey, Doc, I
overseas
can get-
entities.
You said you can't write that as a script for me anymore, but I can get this on a website.
I already found it. They've already got it.
Yeah.
So that's
So
kind of where we're
now,
going.
now, what are those patients less likely to talk to me about? What all the stuff are you on right now?
Yeah.
So guess what it really does to the safety and efficacy and patient care?
Puts you in the
It
dark.
lowers it because now the physician is not going to know what you're doing. Or even if you tell him what you're doing, I don't know where it's from, what your dose is, how many milligrams per cc. Like the amount of discussion I have to have with some really learned people to even convert the medication in a bottle to the appropriate cc administration or units in a syringe is crazy because I thought everyone already understood the metric system. Well, I thought we understood that milligrams in a bottle is not milligrams per cc. It's how many milligrams per cc is that? By how many cc's do I want you taking? That you don't have to be, it's not calculus, but it's certainly math.
I don't know.
And if it's not done, it's really important.
Yeah.
Because doses matter.
Yes.
When you're talking about efficacy and safety.
Correct.
But if someone doesn't even understand the metric conversions of milligrams and cc's and units, and I'm trying to get a certain amount of medicine in a syringe, you know what I don't want that discussion to happen under? A lack of doctor guidance.
Yeah.
Like you're taking a doctor completely out of the mix because the guy's not going to want to put his license at risk by recommending peptide therapy or by telling you how to get the peptides from someone that's not sourcing stuff from out of the country.
Yeah, he's
because
going back
all the
to the gym
research
bag,
labs
right?
are going back to the gym bag,
Yeah,
right?
gym bag
So
pharmacies.
we're literally taking people out of a doctor's office and putting them back into the gym administered level of care.
Yeah.
Like you want to talk about pushing stuff into the back alleys?
Yeah.
That's what does it, is regulations applied inappropriately to protect people that it's not protecting them from anything.
Yeah.
The peptides that we would worry about are a lot of them are banned. Like we talked about chlorohydrate got banned. I thought that was banned a really long time ago, just so you know, in all the movies where the guy pours a bunch of stuff on a napkin and puts it on the face and kidnaps someone, that was chlorohydrate, right? So I didn't even know that was a thing. It was only banned about a year ago.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so there are some things that need banned. Do I think that every peptide that helps you encourage your better administration and use of growth hormone needs banned? No. Have I ever written for or thought unopposed growth hormone was a great idea? No. Have I ever recommended someone taking growth hormone for something? No. Do I think there's way safer ways to get a patient help in those arenas by getting things on board that help get your own IGF-1 levels up and help increase your body's secretory potential and administration of its own growth hormone? Yes.
Yeah.
Is that what peptides would do? Yep. Is the FDA decided that those are banned because of safety issues in bulk components that may have had to do with contamination from foreign sourced material? Yeah, that's the only acknowledgement on most of these substances that you're going to get.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with, because I would never buy it from someone that was sourcing it from a banned, I wouldn't fill a script there. These were compounding pharmacies, not a research lab that didn't have the same scrutiny as a pharmacy.
Yeah.
Compounding pharmacies are regulated. Most research labs are less regulated, as evidenced by, I don't know, some stuff escaping from some research labs that caused the whole world to shut down for a while. I don't know, right? Like, you know what? That probably wouldn't have gotten out of a compounding pharmacy. I mean, it's just ridiculous, right? We're talking about, you talk about the misapplication and overregulation of science to limit its use, not to protect people.
Yeah.
Make no mistake about it. This is not about protecting people from a bunch of contaminated peptides.
I'll be honest with you. There's nutrition shops here in this area that probably should have some things looked at. I've taken pre-workout that probably had larger side effects.
Hey, I got news for you. There's
Dihexa
a lot,
or
almost
BPC.
all the gas station medications.
Yeah.
You know, all the gas station ED sex drugs.
Yeah, the little packets at the
almost
checkout
all
counter.
of them have, almost all of them are made in China or Korea.
Yeah.
And they all have a little bit of sildenafil, which is a prescription drug in the U.S. But because they're not monitoring a lot of those and they're nutraceuticals. So there's a lot of those that have medications in it. Oh, it's horny goat weed. Oh, it's this and this. No, it had a little bit of Viagra in it, right?
Yeah.
And you can do that when you do that. Those are unregulated. But no doctor's telling you to go to the gas station and buy the Ultramax Gold pill. Right, like that. So it's fine if a guy does that, because I didn't tell him to do it. And if someone has a stroke or a high blood pressure that does that, or the opposite, they lower their pressure when they do that.
Yeah.
No one's really in trouble, right? That doesn't mean it was safe. It doesn't mean it was efficacious. I'm interested in helping a patient. If there's a safe, efficacious, inexpensive option for some patients, I worked really hard to try to find those for people because I'm interested in your health.
Correct. There are peptides for almost every indication that we can find. And here's the great part, right? Sometimes, and this is our hope, oppression breeds innovation. And so they're working on peptides for hair growth, like further than what we've seen with GHK Copper and all these other ones that are also on the list.
GHK on the ban list, by the way.
GHK,
so
BPC.
GHKCU, something.
So the good news is there's always innovation, right? But there's literally it's an amino acid, right? And so there's peptides for every indication.
Well, it's not even an amino acid.
No, it is a bond. Yes, correct.
So a protein is large amino acid chains. A peptide are small amino acid chains.
Mm-hmm.
But we're talking because it's naturally occurring. They are making it where you can't get it, even though the body makes it, because it needs to be controlled as a drug. Excuse me, but isn't this exactly what happened with insulin? Yeah. Like, have we not learned our lesson that
insulin is a dangerous peptide?
Oh, for sure.
What happens if I take too much insulin?
You can die.
Oh, is that a side effect?
It is.
That's a
side effect of me. Like, you could kill someone with an insulin.
That's a pretty. That's more than nausea, right?
For sure. Yeah.
Okay.
It's more than a little bit of a rash. It's more than a little bit of a headache from a little bit of vasodilation. Yeah. It's death, right? Now, that's a peptide. Insulin's it's made by the human body. Yeah.
The GLP-1s can't. By the way, the GLP-1s, for everyone listening, because that's one of the biggest requests that we've ever had. Our peptide episode that we had a month or so ago is our most viewed episode, right? There's a massive demand and interest for education on peptides.
Because tirzepatide and semaglutide work.
Yeah,
they avoid a lot of
They made the cut.
They made well.
For now,
because it's a drug, and there's a drug version of it out. They didn't take that off the market.
Yeah,
they did not make tirzepatide or semaglutide on this Schedule II list.
Yeah, because it's being monetized.
I wonder why.
Monetized. Patent equals monetization. Is that the conclusion we're drawing?
I guess.
I'm just the layman.
I don't know. It seemed like so. Wait a minute. So you mean that people get the approval they pay for? Like, if you're sponsored by Big Pharma and you get approval as a drug, it's okay for a doctor to write it, recommend it, and give it to you, and he won't lose his license, right?
Yeah, you're just quoting me, right? I'm the layman. I'm just asking, okay,
because it seems like that would be God. That would be so against the law to incentivize people economically to do something.
We'll back away from that.
Incentivize a pharmacist to recommend a shot to you while you're there, should be against the law.
Yeah.
Wow.
We should probably just
I wonder how many people go to
right?
CVS or Walgreens in the last 6 months and haven't had the talk with the pharmacy about getting some form of an injection while you're there that your physician may or may not know about, may or may not agree with, and you may or may not have done a lot of research on, that you're just going to, because he's getting paid by CVS more to tell you that he has to do that, right? Like, but all these rules are written in your own best interest to help you. That's what we're supposed to believe, right?
So here's the good news, right? There's a lot of excellent peptides still remaining. Sermorelin was one, ipamorelin or ipamorelin, however you choose to pronounce it. Again, I'm the layman. That replaced it, but now we're back to the older version, right? Yeah. Because it was approved
because
by the
ipamorelin was fine.
Yes, but
ipamorelin with CJC 1295 was great.
Yes, but CJC is probably one of the larger culprits on the list. There's a lot of concerns about it as a secretagogue, right? A growth hormone promoter. That's been a major concern.
The concern was that it worked.
The good news is
there may be some contamination in the sourcing from the large bulk components received from other countries.
That's correct.
That's why they're trying to make it where no one gets it.
Yeah.
Not because if a compounder in the U.S. that doesn't outsource contaminated components, and oh, by the way, compounders in the U.S. have to filter at a level that would remove the contaminated component anyway because it was metals.
Yeah.
We're going to make that against the law still, though, right? I'm just checking. I mean, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm just checking. I mean, yeah. I'm just trying to understand. Again, I'm just trying to navigate the waters. You're the one with the big notebook with all the regulatory stuff.
I'm on the next page already.
I'm just trying to figure out how to help a patient get better without,
So to paraphrase so far what we've discussed, research chem sites where people were originally procuring peptides, have put the blemish on the industry, right? It's the pharma grade stuff.
I think do I think a lot of those places did a pretty good job?
Sure.
Yeah, I think so, probably. That's why people continue to use them. They didn't buy stuff. Look, the recidivism even on getting a script filled is really low. Like when a doctor writes a script, we all assume a patient goes and gets it. That's not really true. Right? It's an abysmally low number. that people really feel. And the ones that they feel again and consecutively, if you take out the narcotics, it even drops dramatically lower. So getting a script once, okay, I'll try it. But if I don't notice a giant difference in how I feel right away, I'm not refilling it.
No way.
Right?
Why would you pay for it?
But the recidivism on a lot of those pharmacies was really high. So people saw something that they were looking for and continued to use it.
Yeah, that's a good example. Essentially what we're doing is we're pushing patients away from a regulated method of procuring peptides back into essentially what we'll paraphrase as a black market, right? It's not guided by providers.
Which is great if you own the black market.
Yeah. Well,
and provide all the substrates.
yeah.
But that's not what we're supposed to do, right? Like in a capitalistic society, it's about legal options that are safer, right? And the safety and efficacy is what drives the market.
Right.
Not just access. Like access should not is not what should something success should be determined by.
Correct.
It's about data, patient usage, outcomes. I guess my biggest problem is that with 90% of the regulatory stuff that we have to navigate the waters with all the stem cell part of what we already do, and have worked really hard to stay within the guidance. Now to do this to peptide, like
It's
it feels very purposeful.
It is.
At limiting the inexpensive administration of healthcare to people that didn't want to be part of some big pharma run conglomerate of Western medicine. Yeah. And now they've taken away another choice. We will be navigating the regulatory waters with our patients on these issues. Nice. There are going to continue to be options for patients. And my goal as always is going to be to continue to see myself as a free agent, trying to function the best I can to still be able to be your surgeon and physician, and still kind of help you figure out what the best options are for you to stay healthy.
Yeah. And for patients, I do want to make this statement. For patients that have utilized us, for patients where we've recommended peptides, the pharmacies that we're involved with, we've vetted. Anytime Dr. McKenna or his clinic engages a pharmacy, one of the first things that is done is we ask them for essentially their table of contents, right? We want to know what's in it. What processes do you go to manufacture, procure, get these things
Some
going?
of it's as easy as just saying, are any ingredients from China?
Yeah, but
right?
they
so
have
the
to
answer is
disclose
yes.
it.
Yeah, the answer is yes. We move on, right?
Well, let's just make
so
another.
there's some big
entity angry
disclaimers.
at us now.
That's where all the black market sourcing is going to come from.
I'm just trying to limit the
someone's
number of
getting ready to
enemies.
make a lot of money off this new FDA regulation, and it's not a physician or a patient.
I'm just trying to limit the number of people that are going to hate us after this episode. That's all. You just fired China into the bucket. Why not? No, all jokes aside,
slave laborly made. Not only are they making contaminated sources, but it's made with slave labor. Probably
don't make LeBron James mad. That's not okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was low. Listen, at the end of the day, as a patient, just know that we have done our very best and beyond to make sure that the pharmacies that we've utilized are good sources of these peptides. In talking with the pharmacies that we deal with, they have less than 1% incidence of an adverse reaction, meaning you turned red, you felt flushed, you had a headache, anything like that. Those are all reportable adverse reactions. So the non-medical guy having a conversation with people watching, less than 1%. And for CJC 1295, the most common adverse reaction was flushing, right? It wasn't really an adversarial reaction. It was just something that could happen.
Self-limited and went away.
Some people, I'll tell you on GLP-1s, it's always nausea, constipation, nausea at the top of those. That would be an example of an adverse reaction. But these are safe. They are filtrated. The sourced materials are safe, and they are verified and validated by each
that's
pharmacy.
The other worry is that when the FDA comes out with guys like this, everyone starts to run for the hills and think, oh my God, it wasn't safe.
Yeah.
Well, that's not true.
Right.
So just know that you're fine.
Yeah, and I don't want to harp on this, right? But several of the comments, if you go to the site, and I encourage everybody listening, please go to the site. The hysterical part is it literally says FDA has also identified serious adverse events that may be associated with AOD 9604, right? We're picking on that one today. Though causality is not clear.
Yeah.
Right. On Dihexa, which we could rave about Dihexa. It is one of our highest requested ones. It helps with dementia. It helps with brain fog. It helps with a myriad.
It aids in mental clarity because
Correct.
it's a nutraceutical, right?
It's a neuroprotector,
Yeah.
is what they define it as. Quite literally, it states FDA lacks important information regarding any safety issues raised by Dihexa acetate, including whether it would cause harm if administered to humans. It's on the list. It's a category 2, right? That should, by all intents and purposes, by their own definition, keep it in the bulk category 1 with the FDA.
Still in study.
Correct. But we've moved it to category 2, which means it's a finalized opinion, right, on safety concerns. So
Because it was working.
Yes.
A lot of people take it.
and it's a nootropic.
It's a nootropic. It encourages mental clarity.
Yeah.
It's like taking the right vitamin. Right?
Yeah. I'm excited to hear feedback on this. I'm excited to see how the compound pharmacies respond. They've got a massive investment. There's the two pharmacies
It'll
that
be
we deal
interesting to
with.
see what happens from
Yeah.
here. Because I think that all I really care about is patient.
Right.
And I think that there's been so many, the testimony of the feedback, the ease in helping people get through some pretty significant situations with some peptide augmentation has been really helpful, very useful. And there'll still be options. There's still ways to do some things. But just know that from a regulatory standpoint, that they you're not paranoid when they really are out to get you, and that's the old saying, right? But they're certainly have stated out to get peptide therapy unless it's a drug.
Right.
If it's a drug, probably fine. If it's just a peptide that your body makes that we can augment your administration of, that's probably not going to be okay anymore without some serious physician conversations. Right.
We're still utilizing a major component of our practice that includes all the peptides, which is stem cells. We're still utilizing.
Again, it's a threat letter. It's not.
Correct.
There's no policy yet.
Right. We're still utilizing and looking at labs to determine proper balancing of sexual hormone levels. Right. Those things also matter. They
Look,
help
there was
with all of it.
there was a synthetic estrogen component.
Yes.
That's on the ban list.
Yes.
It should have been for a long time ago. Like
Correct.
it caused cancer. It
Yeah.
was a
So
bad idea.
there's valid. So what you're saying is there's valid concerns that were addressed.
Sure.
But we threw the baby.
We
out
never
with the
wrote
bathwater.
anyone at that, right? We would never write for those peptides because it was a bad idea.
Correct.
Right.
And I think that one, and forgive my butchering of this, but it's diethylstilbestrol. And so it was a synthetic estrogen, which had some concerns for genesis of breast cancer, right? Absolutely, that needs to be looked at. But there's been studies on it, right? There's valid studies. The rest of them, like the Dihexa, where it's hey, we're not sure, but just in case, we're going to throw that one in too.
Yeah. I just think that the whole message for this episode is, number one, I wanted to come out and get ahead of the narrative a little bit because I know a lot of people take peptides and are going to be worried when they see the FDA's banned all these that maybe you didn't feel better. Like that's not true, right? Like, but what's going to happen is it's going to be harder and harder and harder for you to have an inexpensive, safe option outside of big pharma.
Hey,
That's the take-home message from today.
so our commitment to patients, as always, is we're going to do our research. We're going to do our homework. We're going to make sure that the things we say still hold true. We're going to look for alternatives, as always, and we're going to pursue that. And we'll absolutely provide as much information as we can as we get it. I know for a lot of pharmacies and patients, this is just a pretty quick change. So we'll do our best to continue to grit our teeth and measure our response as best we can. So,
As always, the most important part of
yes.
this, and the only reason we do this, is because for me, the goal is to spend more time explaining why and what and how, and that's a lot easier to do when I have an hour at a time than it is in a 20, 30-minute office visit. So thank you for your trust. We appreciate everyone's confidence in us as a clinic and with trusting us with your healthcare, and genuinely appreciate your time and following us on this episode. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Dr. McKenna, I appreciate you. Thank you.